She disappeared in the summer of 1988. A warm, ordinary day turned into a decades-long mystery when 6-year-old Myra Keene vanished from her front yard in Summerfield, Colorado. No sound, no struggle. Just a chalk drawing left unfinished on the sidewalk in a neighborhood that never forgot. 37 years later, someone sees her again, not in person, not in a newspaper. On television, a blurry face in the background of a local news broadcast. Same eyes, same scar, same girl, but she is not 6 anymore. She is a woman now, and she has no memory of ever being missing. How could a child vanish without a trace and reappear decades later, unaware of her own past, and who took her if it was not the man who raised her? If you are ready to uncover the truth hidden for nearly 4 decades, then like this video and subscribe to Unscripted Tales, because this story only gets deeper, stranger, and more haunting the further we go. The television flickered gently in a dim corner of a living room in Ridgway, Wyoming. Not because it was malfunctioning, but because it was old. An RCA console from the late 1980s, too heavy to move and too familiar to replace. Around it, the room sat still wood paneling, faded rugs, the faint scent of lavender and old paper. The kind of home where time seemed to slow down and settle into the floorboards. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the windows. It was Tuesday evening, quiet, normal. On the screen, a news anchor was wrapping up a segment from a fall parade in the next county over. A marching band marched past the camera in slightly offbeat rhythm, followed by a crowd of locals waving, clapping, laughing. Just a wholesome community event. Myra Dalton had not meant to sit down and watch it. Her television mostly collected dust now. She rarely turned it on, not since Walter died, and not since her life had fallen into a careful, repetitive quiet. She was 42, polite, kind, a dental receptionist. She kept to herself, liked the scent of old books, and owned a collection of VHS tapes she organized by date rather than content. Watching live television was rare, but something about the static on that broadcast felt almost alive. Then she saw it, or rather, she did not. Not yet. In the background of the footage, standing between parade watchers, there was a woman in a beige coat and scarf. Her hands were folded. She was not smiling. She was not waving. She was simply standing, still, unmoving. The camera passed over her quickly. No one on screen paid her any attention. But later, online, someone would. A comment appeared on the re-uploaded broadcast. Pause at 1:42. Does anyone else think that looks exactly like Myra Keene? At that moment, Myra Dalton was still sitting in her chair, staring at the credits rolling past. She sipped her tea. She did not know the internet had begun to whisper her name. She did not know someone had recognized her, or that the life she believed to be her own was about to unravel, thread by thread. Myra Dalton woke up the next morning to the smell of coffee drifting from her kitchen. The sun had just begun to warm the frost on her windows. Outside, the streets of Ridgway were quiet, the way they always were. She fed her cat, toasted a slice of bread, and got ready for work at Dr. Halloran's dental clinic, where she had worked for the last 15 years. She wore her usual cardigan, pinned on her name tag, and headed out the door like she always did. Nothing seemed different, but something was. That day at the clinic, every sound felt louder. The buzz of the fluorescent lights overhead, the clicking of the appointment keyboard, the low hum of the dental drill behind closed doors. She found herself staring at her name badge. Myra Dalton. The letters looked too perfect, too final. For the first time, it felt like a name someone else had picked for her. Later that night, she sat on the couch, flipping through her emails on her tablet. Her inbox was quiet except for one unread message in her spam folder. The subject line made her heart skip. Please read. I think I know who you are. She opened it. Inside was a link to the local news broadcast from 5 nights ago in a single sentence. 1-42. That is you. I lived across the street in 1988. Myra stared at the screen. Her hands trembled slightly. She clicked the link. The video began to play. She watched the parade, the band, the crowd. Then she saw her. A woman standing still in the background. The coat, the scarf, the face. Her face. She paused the video, leaned closer. There, just beneath the sleeve of the coat, was a small scar, a curved mark near the elbow. Myra pushed up her own sleeve and stared. The same scar. She had always thought it came from a childhood fall off her bike, but she had no memory of that fall. In truth, she had no clear memory of anything before the age of 11. She ran to her bookshelf and pulled out the oldest photo album she had. The first photo was dated January 1994. She was standing in the snow next to a mailbox, smiling beside Walter Dalton, the man who had raised her. Every page after that was carefully labeled. School events, holiday cards, quiet birthdays, but not a single baby picture. Not a single photo before 1994. And in that first photo, on the corner of the mailbox, was a faded sticker. A glittery unicorn. Myra sat on the floor, heart pounding. She had never told Walter she liked unicorns. She could not remember when she had started liking them, but somehow they were always there. Stickers, a notebook, a keychain she had found in a box once and kept without knowing why. A knock at the door startled her. She stood slowly and opened it. A woman stood outside, nervous eyes, mid-40s. Her hands trembled slightly. "Are you Myra Dalton?" the woman asked. Myra nodded. "I know this will sound strange, but I think I knew you when we were little. My name is Ava Brooks. You were my best friend. You were Myra Keene." Myra felt like the ground beneath her had shifted. Ava reached into her coat and pulled out a folded photograph. It was a second-grade class picture from 1987. There were 20 children, a school banner, and a girl in the front row with braids and a red ribbon. Myra stared at the girl. She knew that face. It was her own. What happened to Myra Keene after she disappeared from Summerfield? And how did she become Myra Dalton with no memory of who she used to be? The photograph sat on the kitchen table between them. Myra had not touched it. Since Ava left, she just stared. 20 second graders lined up in neat rows, all smiling, all unaware of the life ahead of them. A school banner above Red Summerfield Elementary, class of 1987. And there she was. Front row, pigtails, red ribbon, hands folded in her lap. It was her. She did not remember standing there. Did not remember the photo being taken. It felt like a stranger's memory printed with her face. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. Myra sat in silence, her hands clenched in her lap. The more she stared at that picture, the more she began to feel something stir inside her. Not a memory, not yet, but something close. A flicker, a breath. She stood up and walked to her hallway. Closet. Inside, behind a stack of old coats, was a box Walter had always said was just for storage. Junk, he called it. Tools and parts. Myra had never opened it. That night, she did. Inside were 4 boxes, each labeled with a single letter, M, L, A, and K. She opened the one marked M. Inside, she found drawings, scribbles, rainbows, stick figures, some with names she did not recognize. One had a message written in a child's handwriting. To Myra, "Love, Mommy." Myra's breath caught. She kept digging. At the bottom of the box was a small cassette tape. The label read, Myra, age 5. There was no date, no explanation, just that name. She did not own a tape player anymore. No one really did. But she remembered a small thrift shop across town that always had old electronics in the back. The next day, after work, she drove there. The place smelled like mildew and cardboard, but it felt comforting in a strange way. She found a dusty cassette player for $6. The woman at the counter looked surprised that anyone still bought one. At home, Myra closed the blinds, sat cross-legged on her rug, and slid the tape in. For a moment, there was only static, then a woman's voice. Soft, warm. "All right, sweetheart, ready." To sing, a pause. A shuffled. Then came a tiny voice. "Twinkle, twinkle, little star." Myra froze. It was her voice. She knew it in her bones. The woman sang along gently. At the end, there was laughter. That was perfect. "Myra, Mommy is so proud of." Myra pressed stop. Her hand shook. She had never heard that voice before, but it felt like home. That night, she did not sleep. She played the tape again and again until the batteries died. As the song faded in and out, memories began to whisper nothing clear, but small images. A couch, a porch, cinnamon toast, a screen door banging shut the next morning. She called Ava. I need to see you again. They met at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Ava looked tired, but hopeful. She placed something on the table. A drawing, crayons on old paper, 2 stick girls labeled Myra and Ava above them. Scrawled in backward letters were the words "best friends forever." Myra stared at it, but there was a third figure, a tall man in a coat. His name was scribbled out in black crayon, so hard the paper had torn. "I think that was someone you were scared of," Ava said gently. Myra looked up. "I think he took me. Why would someone take a 6-year-old child and erase her name from the world? And how did Walter Dalton become the man who raised her?" Myra sat on her back porch that evening, the sun just a thin orange line behind the ridge. The drawing Ava had given her was resting in her lap. She ran her fingers over the crayon lines, the torn edge where a name had been scratched away so violently. The longer she looked at it, the more something heavy grew in her chest. That tall man in the coat, the one she could not name, the one her younger self had tried to forget, he had been real. Inside her house, everything felt too quiet. She wandered to her bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled down a worn shoebox she barely remembered keeping. Inside were old receipts, Christmas cards, and something that did not belong. A maroon leather notebook, the edges worn thin. She opened it carefully. A dried flower fell out from between the first pages. There was no name on the inside cover, but Myra recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Walter's. The first entry was dated September 1994. "Myra is adjusting well. Still quiet, but I am told that as expected." She flinched when I dropped a glass in the kitchen. Loud sounds seemed to scare her. Myra kept reading, her heart pounding harder with every line. She asked today why there are no baby pictures of her. I told her they were lost in a flood at a storage unit. She seemed to believe it. "I feel like a criminal." She flipped through page after page. There were dozens of entries, descriptions of her behavior, notes about her sleep patterns, her drawings, the way she sometimes woke up crying, asking for someone whose name Walter could not make out. He wrote about the guilt, the confusion, the fear of losing her. I never asked where she came from. I was told to care for her, and I did. I told myself I was doing the right thing. But at night, I wonder if I am the villain in her story. Myra pressed the notebook to her chest and cried. Walter had raised her. He had packed her lunches, read her stories, taken her to dentist appointments. He had been her father in every way that mattered. But he had also lied. He had known something was wrong, and he had kept her anyway. The next day, she took the notebook to the library and began searching public records. There was no sign of a Myra Dalton before 1994. No birth certificate, no medical records, no school enrollment, as if she had just appeared out of thin air. She sat in the back corner of the archives room, surrounded by dusty files and microfilm reels. A librarian passed by and noticed her blank stare. "Are you all right?" Myra looked up, her voice soft. "I think I have been missing for a very long time." Across the state, a woman named Elise Hart, once a local reporter, sat at her desk, scanning old news tapes for a blog she had started in retirement. Her screen flickered with footage from a 1989 segment she had recorded during the search for Myra Keene. Elise had followed the story for months before it went cold. She had filed it away under lost causes, until someone emailed her a screenshot from the recent news broadcast. Elise zoomed in on the face of the woman in the background. Her heart skipped. She pulled out her old notebooks from a box in her closet. Her own handwriting stared back. A witness on Mirror Street had once described a light blue sedan, a man in a long coat, waiting in the car for hours. No one ever identified him. That lead had gone nowhere. The focus had shifted to Myra's family, then to a wandering stranger. Nothing ever stuck. And then, silence. Elise picked up her phone and called the Ridgeway police station. "I think I have something on a cold case from 1988. Can you connect me with someone who handles missing persons?" Back in Ridgeway, Myra returned home with her heart heavy and her thoughts louder than ever. She could not focus at work. She kept forgetting names, numbers, simple routines. One evening, she went to her garage, where Walter had stored old boxes. He told her never to touch. He had said they were tools, old junk, not worth moving. But something about that did not sit right anymore. She found a rusted lockbox and cracked it open with a hammer. Inside were drawings, dozens of them. Some familiar. One had a rainbow and stick figures standing in front of a pink house. Labeled underneath were 3 names: me, Mommy, Luca. She did not know a Luca, but the handwriting was hers. At the very bottom of the box was a small cassette marked Myra. Age 5. She stared at it, the one she had already played, but this time, she noticed something else beneath it. A folded sheet of paper with a child's handwriting. "If someone finds me, please take me back to my mom. She has the pink house. I missed her." Myra fell to her knees, pressing the note against her chest. That night, she lay awake, replaying every bedtime story Walter had told her. How people become stars when they vanish. How the world is full of places we are meant to forget, but she could no longer forget. Somewhere out there, someone still remembered her as Myra, who was the man in the long coat. And what really happened on that hot July afternoon in 1988. Detective Rosa Menendez had seen hundreds of cold cases in her career, but something about the email from Elise Hart made her stop scrolling. A missing girl. A woman spotted in the background of a local parade. A 2nd grade class photo. And a name that had not been spoken in decades. Rosa was quiet, observant, and relentless when it came to the forgotten ones. She picked up the phone, made 2 calls, and by the end of the day, she was in her car headed toward Ridgeway. She met Myra Dalton at her home. The porch light flickered overhead. The wind blew softly through the chimes. Myra looked nervous, but calm, as if her body knew something her mind had not yet caught up to. They sat at the kitchen table. The drawing, the cassette, the letter to Mommy, the notebook filled with Walter's confessions, all of it laid out between them. Rosa listened carefully. "Do you feel safe here?" she asked. Myra paused. "I do not know anymore." Rosa nodded, opened her folder, and pulled out a copy of a police report from 1988. A neighbor on Myra Keene Street had reported a blue sedan parked across the house for hours that afternoon. A man inside, wearing a long coat. No one had ever identified him. Rosa flipped to the next page. "Do you remember the name Walter Dalton?" Myra nodded slowly. "He raised me. Do you know how he came to have custody?" Myra shook her head. "No, he just always had me. There are no adoption records, no court documents, nothing legal." Myra sat back in her chair, heart pounding. Then Rosa pulled out a name. "Does the name Lionel Crick mean anything to you?" Myra's body reacted before her mind did. A chill ran down her spine. Her stomach turned. "It sounds wrong," she said quietly. "He was a former child services worker," Rosa explained. "He worked for a private agency in the late 80s. There were complaints, reports of missing files, forged custody papers. Then he disappeared in 1991. No charges ever stuck." Rosa leaned forward. "We believe he was connected to an underground network. They posed as legal adoption services, but moved children without proper records." Myra's eyes filled with tears. "You think he sold me?" "We believe Lionel arranged your disappearance and placed you under Walter's care. We are still not sure whether Walter knew everything or only part of it. But someone erased your identity, Myra, on purpose." Myra sat in silence. Her mind raced back to small things, moments that had once felt normal. The day Walter told her not to worry about baby photos. How he said her mother could not stay, but she had loved her. How he called her the gift he never expected. She had believed him. That night, Myra went into the basement, a room she rarely entered. It smelled of dust and damp concrete. In the far corner beneath an old workbench, She found a suitcase. It was old, brown leather, scratched and scuffed. She pulled it open. Inside were pieces of a forgotten life, a baby blanket, a music box shaped like a unicorn, a child's shoe, and a thin book titled The Story of You. She opened it first page. In faded handwriting, "This book belongs to Myra Keene." Suddenly, upstairs, a creak, a door closing. Myra froze. She waited. No footsteps followed. No voices. Maybe it was the wind, or maybe something else. She grabbed the suitcase, turned off the basement light, and climbed the stairs without looking back. She placed the suitcase on her couch, hugged her knees to her chest, and let the silence swallow her whole. She turned the music box key slowly. A soft lullaby played, a sound from a time she could not remember, but somehow still knew by heart. She cried, not just from confusion, but because something inside her was beginning to remember. The warmth of a woman's hands, the smell of cinnamon toast, the way someone used to tuck her in and say, "You are my bright star." Her memories were no longer lost. They were waking up the next day. Rosa called again. We received a DNA match. Myra's heart stopped. Your mother is alive. How will Myra face the woman who never stopped looking for her? And what truths are waiting when mother and daughter finally meet? The phone call echoed in Myra's ears long after the line had gone silent. Your mother is alive. The words did not feel real. Not at first. It was like hearing a fairy tale whispered too softly to believe. Myra sat on the edge of her bed, phone still in her hand, suitcase open beside her. The music box had gone quiet, but its melody seemed to linger in the room. She had stared at the page from the book again and again. This book belongs to Myra Keene. She was not Myra Dalton. Not really. That name had been given to her by someone who wanted to rewrite her story. Her real name, spoken aloud by a mother who never stopped looking, was Myra. Rosa arranged the meeting carefully. It would take place at a quiet church in Summerfield, the town Myra had vanished from. The building was plain. Brick walls, soft yellow light, and wooden pews that creaked with age. It was not dramatic. It was not filmed. It was real. Myra arrived. First, her hands were shaking, her heart pounding hard against her ribs. The suitcase stayed in the car, but in her coat pocket was the folded drawing. The one she had buried all those years ago beneath the old oak tree. The one that said, "Take me back to my mom." Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside, slowly, carefully, as if afraid to breathe. She looked older, her hair streaked with gray, her shoulders thinner, but the eyes were the same. Myra knew those eyes. They stared at each other for a long time. Neither spoke. Then the woman stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace so strong and nearly broke them both. "My baby," she whispered. "My Myra." Myra did not cry at first. Her body was too stunned. Her hands shook. Her breath hitched. But she let the woman, her mother, hold her. They sat in the back row of the empty church and talked for hours. Her mother's name was Lena Keene. She had never stopped searching. After Myra vanished in 1988, Lena had spent every cent she had looking for her. She mortgaged the house, sold her car, put up flyers in cities she had never even visited. She lost her job. She lost friends. But she never gave up hope. "I used to tell people you were still alive," Lena said. "Even when they looked at me like I was broken, I knew it. A mother knows." Myra listened, holding the folded drawing in her hands. Lena told her stories, how Myra used to line up her stuffed animals before bedtime, how she named a worm Martin and made him a paper house, how she hated green grapes but loved cinnamon toast with extra sugar. Some of it sounded familiar, some did not, but all of it felt true. Myra learned that her father had passed away from cancer years ago, and her little brother, Luca, the boy from the drawing, had died in a car accident at 17. She had missed an entire life, but the most painful truth came in the quietest moment. Lena pulled out a photo, one Myra had never seen. A little girl smiling, holding a unicorn toy in front of a pink house. It was her. "This was the last photo I took of you," Lena said softly. "The day before you disappeared." Myra stared at the image. The unicorn toy, the same as the music box, the same as the stickers on her backpack. Unicorns had followed her like breadcrumbs through a forest she had been lost in for decades. Lena placed the photo in Myra's hands. "You left a trail," she said, "and we finally followed it back to each other." That night, Myra sat in her motel room. The photo beside her on the pillow, she felt full of someone else's memories. But she also felt something new. A beginning. Then Rosa called again. "We found something else. Letters hidden in a storage unit Walter used. He knew Myra. He found out the truth years after he took you in, and he chose to stay silent." Myra closed her eyes. He did not take her, but he did keep her. And in doing so, he helped erase a part of her life. The next morning, she visited his grave. It was small, on a quiet hill outside Ridgeway. She brought no flowers, only her drawing. She placed it at the base of the stone. "I wish you had told the truth," she said softly. "But thank you for keeping me alive." Then she stood and walked away. But just as she reached the car, an envelope waited tucked under her windshield wiper. No return address. Inside was a photograph. A different little girl, smiling, holding a unicorn. Plush. Written on the back. "She is not the only one. How many children were lost like Myra? And how far does the truth really go?" The rain had started gently, just a quiet tapping against the windows of Myra's motel room. Outside, the streets of Summerfield were empty, the sky low and gray, like it was holding something heavy. Myra sat on the bed with the envelope in her hands. The photo inside stared back at her. A little girl, maybe 5 years old, smiling wide, holding a unicorn plush with worn fabric and one missing eye. On the back of the photo, 5 words in fading ink. "She is not the only one." Myra turned the photo over again and again. Her fingers trembled. Somewhere, another child had lived a story like hers. Another name. Another life rewritten. She took the photo straight to Detective Rosa the next morning. They met at the police station in a quiet side room, the one Rosa always used for sensitive cases. Rosa studied the photo carefully, then nodded. The unicorn plush. "It matches a toy from a limited run in the mid-80s. Only sold in 3 states, Rosa said. Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. Rosa ran her finger along a list she had been building for weeks. She was already cross-checking missing children cases from those 3 states between 1987 and 1991. Dozens of names, most with no leads. A few stood out, and one name rose to the top. Madison Riley vanished from her home in Salt Lake City in 1989. Age 6, no witnesses. No signs of struggle. The only thing her mother ever reported missing with her was a stuffed unicorn. Rosa arranged a meeting with Madison's mother, Karen Riley. Myra agreed to go with her. Together, they drove through winding roads toward a small town outside of Salt Lake, where Karen now lived alone in a small house filled with quiet. Karen sat in the corner of a library meeting room when they arrived. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her eyes looked tired, like someone who had spent a lifetime searching the shadows of her past. When Myra entered, Karen stood up slowly. Her eyes widened, then her voice, soft and trembling. "You look like her. The cheekbones, the eyes. You look like my Madison." Myra stepped forward and handed her the unicorn photo. Karen gasped. Tears spilled instantly. She held the photo with shaking hands and pressed it to her chest. "I thought I was crazy. I thought no one believed me. I was told to move on, that maybe she wandered off, but I always knew she was taken." Myra sat beside her and gently placed her hand over Karen's. "You were never crazy. I think our lives were connected. I think we were both part of something much bigger than anyone knew." They sat there in silence, just the sound of the wall clock ticking and their breathing soft and uneven. Rosa watched them both with quiet eyes. She had seen many kinds of grief, but this one was different. This one had been buried too long. That evening, back in her motel room, Myra stared at the walls. Photos, documents, names, a whole web beginning to form. And in the center of it all, one man, Lionel Craig. He had vanished in 1991. No trace since. But Rosa had a lead. She called Myra the next morning. "We found him." Myra's chest tightened. "Where is he?" "He is living under a different name in Oregon. He is sick, terminal, but he is alive, and he remembers you." Myra did not answer right away. She walked to the window, the rain just beginning again. It had followed her from town to town, like the past refusing to stay quiet. Would she face him? Would she ask him why he took her? Or would she walk away forever? What happens when Myra stands face to face with the man who stole her life? And what will he admit before his time runs out? The drive to Oregon felt longer than it was. Myra stared out the car window, trees flashing past like old memories, too fast to hold, too blurred to name. Rosa sat quietly in the driver's seat, hands steady on the wheel, letting the silence settle between them. Neither spoke much. Some moments do not need words. They arrived at a small hospital just after noon. The building was simple, with worn siding and a sagging roof. Inside, the air smelled of antiseptic and fading hope. A nurse led them to a private room at the end of a quiet hallway. Lionel Craig was lying in a bed by the window, thinned by illness, his skin pale and eyes sunken, oxygen tubes wrapped around his face. He looked smaller than Myra imagined, frail, but when he saw her walk into the room, his eyes sharpened. "I know you," he rasped. Myra did not blink. She stepped closer, voice firm. "No, you do not know me. You stole me." Lionel coughed. His voice cracked like brittle paper. "You were better off," he said. "Better off," Myra repeated, her hands clenched. "You ripped me out of my life. You made my mother believe I was dead." Lionel looked away. "I did what I was paid to do." "Who paid you?" she asked. "Tell me the truth." He hesitated, his breath shallow. There were others. Private requests. People who wanted children. Some knew. Some did not ask questions. Did Walter Dalton know? She asked at first. "No," Lionel whispered. He thought it was legal. "I showed him forged papers. But later, I think he figured it out. And he chose to keep me anyway." Myra said, more to herself than to Lionel. "He loved you," Lionel said quietly. Myra shook her head. "Love does not undo a crime." She stepped closer. "I remember your voice. I remember your car. I remember being afraid." Lionel closed his eyes. His lips barely moved. "I am sorry, but it was too late." Myra turned and walked out of the room, the door clicking. Shut behind her. In the hallway, Rosa waited. "You did well," she said softly. "He was a coward," Myra replied, "but now I can let that part go." Back in Ridgeway, Myra sat under the oak tree in her backyard. The leaves had begun to fall, swirling around her like pieces of a puzzle that had finally landed in place. She held a sketchbook in her lap. On the page, she had drawn a house, a swing set, a music box, and a girl in the middle holding them all together. She signed it, Myra Keene, 2025. That night, she opened a drawer in her desk and found an old letter she had once written as a child, long before her name was taken. The paper was crumpled, the handwriting uneven. "If I forget who I am, please help me remember." She placed it beside her drawing and whispered to herself, "I remember now." But just as Myra began to feel whole again, another letter arrived, no return. Addressed. Inside, one line typed neatly. "There are 3 more. Will Myra search for the others like her? And what secrets still wait to be uncovered?" The letter sat on Myra's kitchen table, clean and plain. No name, no stamp, no handwriting. Just one typed sentence on a white sheet of paper. "There are 3 more." Myra read it again and again. She turned it over, held it up to the light, checked the envelope for anything else. Nothing. Just that message, clear and simple. It felt like a warning, or maybe a call. She stared at the words until they began to echo in her mind. There are 3 more. 3 more children. 3 more lives stolen and rewritten like hers. The next morning, she met Rosa at the Ridgeway Police Department. Myra handed her the letter. Rosa read it in silence, her expression unreadable. "Someone knows more than they are saying," Rosa said quietly. "This was not sent to scare you. This was meant to point you toward something. They went back to Rosa's list names of children who went missing between 1987 and 1991 in the same 3 states. Some had been found, many had not, and 3 names stood out. All girls, all between the ages of 4 and 7. All cases that went cold with no leads. They looked closer at one. Sarah Givens disappeared in 1990 from a small town in Nevada. Age, 5, no witnesses. A missing unicorn toy listed in the original police report. The same toy again. Myra's heart raced. It was like the past had left behind pieces, symbols, a trail for her to follow. Later that day, she drove to a quiet bookstore. In town, it was the place she used to work before everything changed. The owner, Mrs. Finch, gave her a gentle hug when she walked in. No questions, just kindness. Myra asked to use the back office computer. She opened a new email account and typed one line. To anyone who feels like their story is missing pieces, I am listening. She posted it on forums, community boards, anonymous message sites for adoptees and missing person cases. Within 2 days, the replies flooded in. Some were confused, some were heartbreaking, and one stood out. A woman named Sarah, age 39, living in Nevada. She said she had no memories before the age of 7. No photos of herself younger than that, and her birth certificate was issued in 1991. The same year, Myra became Myra. Myra responded immediately. They set a meeting in a neutral space, a community center in a small desert town surrounded by dust and silence. Sarah sat at a table when Myra walked in. She had dark hair, soft eyes, and a nervous smile. I do not know why, Sarah said quietly, but when I saw your post, something inside me felt awake for the first time in years. Myra slid a photo across the table. It was the unicorn plush from her own childhood. Sarah's eyes widened. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. A unicorn horn keychain, torn, faded. I have had this since I was a kid, Sarah whispered, but I never knew where it came from. They stared at each other, 2 women piecing together a past stolen from them. Rosa later confirmed it. Sarah's DNA matched a family who had reported a missing girl in 1990. Her real name was not Sarah. It was Julia Givens. Myra held her hand as she cried. You were not forgotten, she said. None of us were. Later that week, Myra sat under the oak tree again, her drawing pad open in her lap. This time, she sketched 4 small figures. A girl in the middle, and 3 others, hands joined. There were 3 more. Now, there were 2. Who sent the letter, and how many more children are still waiting to be found? Winter arrived early in Ridgeway that year. The first snowfall came quiet and slow, covering streets and rooftops like a hush over a long, unfinished sentence. Inside her home, Myra Keene sat at her kitchen table, the unicorn photo pinned to the wall behind her, the letter that started it all folded beside her teacup. She had found 2 others. She had faced the man who stole her. She had reunited with her mother. But there was still something unfinished. Not a mystery, not a name, it was her purpose. She knew now that she had not survived. Just for herself, she had survived so others might be found too. In the weeks that followed, Myra launched something small but powerful, a community project. 1 desk, 1 phone, 1 laptop. She called it the Unicorn Project. It offered DNA help to adoptees with no records, helped parents of long-missing children search quietly, patiently, legally. It connected people who had lived their whole lives wondering where they came from. And people came. Mothers, fathers, grown children who always felt a piece missing. Letters, emails, drawings from strangers who thought they remembered a girl with a braid, a boy with a scar, a neighbor who vanished without goodbye, and through it all, Myra remained steady. Her story had once been buried. Now it was a bridge. She kept in touch with Sarah, now Julia, who had reconnected with her birth family. She kept the photo of young Madison close, and Rosa continued working every lead to find her, never letting the trail go cold again. Myra also visited her mother Lena often. They baked together. They walked slowly through quiet neighborhoods, Lena would tell her stories she no longer remembered, and Myra would listen, not needing to recall every detail to know they belonged to her. One afternoon, Myra visited the elementary school where that second-grade photo had been taken all those years ago. A mural now stood at the front entrance, a tree with open hands, painted across the trunk, and names of local children lost and found. She found her own name there, not Myra Dalton, but Myra Keene. She stood for a long time in the snow, gloved hands in her pockets, breath rising in soft clouds. Before she left, she pinned something beside the tree. It was her drawing, the one with 4 children holding hands, and at the top, written in her handwriting, "If I forget who I am, please help me remember." That night, as the cold settled in and street lamps lit the sleepy town, Myra sat by the fireplace. The same lullaby from the old music box played from her phone, a digital copy she had recorded to never lose again, and she smiled. Not because everything had been fixed, not because every answer had come, but because she had found her name, her voice, her place, and because she knew there were still children out there, waiting to be remembered. To those who are still watching this story, thank you. If you made it this far, it means you believe in memory, in truth, and in second chances. This story deserves your like and your support. And this time, it is not just a request. It is a dare from my mother. Help me reach 1,000 likes on this video. It is totally free, but it means the world. And tell me in the comments, from which city are you watching this story?